Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Real pleasure to welcome back to the program Dave Weigel, author of the Americana newsletter at Semaphore. Dave, I love reading your pieces over at Semaphore. I'm excited to see where we're going with this. But we were just saying before you came on, you've been swimming in this story for a month, but on the Republican side.
Yeah, a little bit on the Democratic side, because the Democrats were frozen. They either were figuring out how to say they wanted Biden to not run, or not saying anything, or if John Fetterman was the exception, defending Biden and demanding this whole thing go away. But with Republicans, they've been feeling incredible since the debate, and they had this sense of angst, I wouldn't say panic, about what would happen if Biden dropped out and was replaced. And because in conservative discourse for a very long time, there had been questions about this. If you were listening, I wrote a story June 2023 from Iowa, where I was talking to Republican voters and elected officials, Joni Ernst, and just none of them thought Biden would end up being the nominee. They really couldn't. They really assumed Democrats were going to switch out the nominee. They assumed it'd be done more cleanly, like there was a plan to do this. I don't think this looks like that. But they've been worrying and saying, okay, if it's not the candidate who's so old that a lot of voters just won't vote for him on ideological reasons, we need to be ready for Democrats to swap somebody in. And they thought it wouldn't be Harris because they assumed Democrats would be able to find the most popular Democrat in the country and put them in as a ringer. That's their only surprise. There were some people who convinced themselves, like Vivek Ramaswamy, that Democrats would convince Michelle Obama to run. Ted Cruz is saying the same thing. I just was listening to a press conference. Cruz was giving a text about this, where he twice referred to things he predicted on his podcast. Like, this really underlines how much of the discourse they had about this thing going on.
I can't believe. Was it like a total head fake regarding Clinton not coming on and being the nominee?
They never really talked about a little bit. I shouldn't say never, because if you go on Twitter Spaces or you listen to Rumble, this has been a water cooler conversation or a podcast conversation for at least a year, longer than that. Surely they have to swap somebody else out for Biden. And look, they were right. They found the nut. They were right this time that Biden wasn't going to be the nominee. They thought there was a plan from the beginning. And there was even, I remember, I give him some credit. I was talking to Vivek Ramaswamy at the Libertarian Convention over Memorial Day weekend, a month before the debate. And he was, in his very humble way, telling reporters that they need to smarten up and see Democrats only agreed to this early debate in June because they were going to swap out Biden. Well, I don't think that's why they did it, based on all my reporting, but that happened. That did happen, that they need to deal with a new candidate for the first time ever.
So, all right. So give me a sense of like where, well, I mean, you were at the convention too. I mean, when they would talk about Trump, looking serene and this and that, I mean, aside from the possibility that maybe he was on painkillers because of his ear, I don't know if that was the case or not, but the past like 3 weeks had been glorious for Trump. I mean, the debate, but also the fact that like all of his criminal stuff immediately, over the course of a week, basically went away because of the Supreme Court thing. I mean, he's still even contesting his sentencing, got pushed back in New York, even. Like it seemed like all of a sudden the road was wide open, and all of a sudden now it seems like it's a little bit congested.
Yes, and you put it pretty well. That really, I'd say all year Republicans felt good. After the debate, they thought they had the election locked up. They didn't see polling collapsing for Biden because Biden's polls were already pretty low, but they saw they had leads everywhere. They were talking about expanding the map into Minnesota and New Mexico and Virginia. It was the most joyous I've seen Republicans since, I would say since 2004, since Bush in 2004, when they were pretty sure after that convention that they had everything locked up. I'm trying to remember the time. Yeah, the timing at the time, the Swift boat thing was already underway, so they really thought that was over. And this is an X factor. They don't like the X factor. So when I was talking to them at the convention over the week, they did start to adjust their talking points. First, they thought the assassination attempt which they talked about again and again in religious terms, and I do think is important. They really again and again said that God had saved Trump by getting him to turn his head. They said that was going to win the election. I was at an event with Tucker Carlson on Monday where he said, "Oh, that's it. That's Trump will be the next president because people will see the video and say that that man is a hero and we need to put him in power." And then over the course of the week, they started to spin a little bit more. Well, if they replace with Harris, they've never said, and we're going to lose to Harris. But they really did try to will themselves into this idea that no one could ever beat Donald Trump because he survived this assassin's bullet, and therefore he would have to win. You can tell, not motivated reasoning, but you can tell when people are just repeating something, hoping it becomes true. And I think it faded over the course of the week for many reasons. Everyone forgets things in 5 minutes these days. Just news cycles move faster. My pet theory that's a little bit gauche, I guess, is that just because the injury was so minor, because we didn't have like weeks of Trump in the hospital, what's going to happen to him, things of that nature, because he got nicked in the ear and that was it. It was both incredible luck and also, how close did he come? He came a second away from this, but it has not just captured the nation's hearts the way that they wanted it to. It captured Republicans' hearts. For Republicans, it seems incredibly important. For the swing voter, who is there somebody who now says, "Well, I've seen Donald Trump survive a close call with death." I haven't seen that yet. It's very hard to poll, but I heard less of that at the RNC as he was just giving his normal speech, giving more than a convention speech, his normal or off the teleprompter lengthy speech. They was kind of back to normal. We have Donald Trump as our nominee, and there are pluses and minuses.
Well, there's an analogy. Sorry. There's an analogy between Biden not having too far to fall in the polls after the debate because he was already low, and Republicans not having too far to add to their notion that Trump is Jesus because they already sort of felt that. Mm-hmm. And so you can't be super Jesus. It's sort of binary. You're either the Messiah or you're not. It's not like super Messiah. But go ahead. Emma.
Yeah, there's nowhere to go. And I mentioned Tucker, and he was even saying this is inevitable because they, capital THE, they are trying to take out Trump. And as the week went on, it became clear that crooks didn't really have an ideological motivation.
Right.
This being the deep state trying to take out Trump. That there is always the danger with them, with I think the modern Republican Party, which has basically replaced the media in its own landscape. There is a danger in everybody agreeing on something that has not gotten outside that bubble.
Yes. Yeah, and to add to what Sam was saying as well, it just feels like Trump, there's no room to change people's minds about Trump in the sense that he's been in our lives basically nearly for 10 years as a political figure. Everybody already has their opinions of Donald Trump at a certain point. So like turning him into a martyr to expand Republicans' reach, it just didn't have that same salience. And I saw somebody say this is the first election since 76 or 80 where there's not a Biden, a Clinton, or a Bush on the ticket, which is astounding to think about. But this is where the Democrats actually have a real opportunity to lean into youth change future, which is why I think I feel positively about Harris's prospects relative to maybe some other people, because it really is a way to turn the page on an era of politics where people were so dejected by these two choices, where that's why like that evidence of Trump not being able to use that, it's just like everyone's opinion on Trump in this country is freaking locked in at this point for the most part.
Yeah, I've been wondering about that. Also hard to poll. We're all going off takes and our own conversations, but I try to talk to a mix of people who are not always involved in politics, and they really, you could feel this. There just was this dread across the country that we'd have to choose between two candidates from 2020. Both of them, I think Trump is about as popular as he was then, but he has more scar tissue from January 6th, and he's giving worse speeches. And Biden had declined a lot, and just you could tell there are a lot of people who, if you quiz them on what they want a Republican trifecta or Democrat trifecta to do, I'm not being insulting. I don't think they have ideas. It's just they really resented that this was two old guys, and now it's not. And I want to see what happens. I don't know yet. There are people who totally woke up today and had no idea there was a female vice president because they just don't pay attention. And now they're learning, oh, wait a second. There's some like almost Generation Xer. I think she's like the last month of boomer, but Generation X passing candidate versus Donald Trump. That's different.
I think she is Gen X. How old is she?
She's nearly 60.
Yeah, she was born. She's right
She
on
looks
the
great.
It's really annoying because you'd like there to be a clean Gen X decision, but like, when did the baby boomer generation end? It's right around when she was born.
65 is around. I think. I mean, because I'm Gen X, but that's not important.
Not really.
I know. Now I know, Dave. You said you're not sure. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. I know you do, and I know we got to coax it out of you. But before we get there.
Some things, I just don't like to predict polling, because then
no, I know you know how this ends. I know how you know. I know you know this. But wait, before we go on, because I want to get to like how they're going to deal with Harris. But give us you were immersed in this story, this really since the debate. Where were you? Like, give us a sense of what you know in terms of the Democratic side, right? Because there's there over the past week or so, there became more reason to sort of like see that there was sort of like a dual track type of thing that was going on. One was get Biden to step aside. And the other was this question of like, how do you bypass Harris, or do you bypass Harris, and who was sort of lining up on that and who wasn't?
Yeah. The bypass Harris stuff was very funny, and that was some of the best stuff we had at Semaphore, were Democratic professionals, just people involved in the party. James Carville's the most famous, but then on down, just coming up with these weird Willy Wonka factory tests for how you would pick a new nominee, and none of them had any basis in what the party had ever done. It was just the closest comparison to this is 1968, which Democrats hate to think about, where LBJ drops out, but then also RFK is assassinated with a bunch of delegates for the convention, and they're released. But totally different system. Most states didn't have primaries like we know them at the time. So
can we? I just want to stop one there, so the people don't know this. In 1968, there was maybe a dozen and a half primaries. Period. Like, people don't understand that the primary system, as we know it today, which is far more democratic, small d, democratic, was instituted after a commission that McGovern chaired, and I can't remember who else it was. So we didn't really get that until like 1972, which was in part of McGovern. Like, the union bosses were becoming too strong, I think, for some in the Democratic Party at that time, and it was all backroom deals for the most part.
Yeah, if you lived in Minnesota or Texas or New York or Virginia, like, there are most states you didn't have a primary, so it was much more, well, we assume the party bosses are going to get in a room and figure something out, and we'd like there to be a vote of confidence in our nominee. It was actually Gene McCarthy who went to the convention having won the most primaries, but he only won 6 primaries, so nobody cared. Not nobody. But to zoom that forward to 2024, all these strategists saying there must be some other way. They were operating, every time I say the word context, I now think of Kamala's voice, but they were operating in the context of, well, it's been 50 years of normal primaries, and it feels anti-democratic to not have some sort of vote or something. And an undercurrent of that was also, the party has a bunch of talent now, which it didn't have in 2016. And wouldn't it be great if we had some new Democrat to roll out, and not the vice president whose approval rating is like 40%? Those are the thoughts. That all faded over, just hours on Sunday. I was calling around Sunday, but I'm calling somebody, and before I get to them, they put out a statement, and you could do the tea leaf reading of how Obama didn't say, here's my endorsement of Harris. He just said we're moving forward. Some Democrats went out their way to not endorse Harris, like some Senate candidates, especially, didn't say Harris right away, because they are worried about that. It's not just that she's unpopular; they're worried about, well, I'm going to have to answer a question now about some position she took on immigration that I didn't have to answer before, and it's kind of awkward. But most of them were just stampeding towards Harris. Like most of the elected Democrats, and again, it's because of this primary thing. It was the chairman of the Minnesota DFL. His take on it was, well, there was a primary and 50 million Democrats voted for a Biden-Harris ticket, and that's spin, but that's not crazy. I mean, most people who voted for Joe Biden have thought, okay, well, who's his running mate? Let me conceive of her as president. It would have been just way less democratic if we said, well, no one has democratic legitimacy. We're just going to have a couple of debates on TV and say that person's the nominee.
And let a panel of 3 celebrity judges decide who wins or something. It's just absolutely bizarre.
They didn't know. They didn't have a plan. They just said, "Oh, wouldn't it be great if we got a totally fresh start and not Harris?" And for most elected Democrats, you can't do that. You can't go back home and say, "Yes, I threw both Biden and the vice president under the bus for this governor that you've never heard of." That was the choice, and they just didn't make that choice. I haven't seen any Democrat. I haven't seen any Democrat come out and say, "I choose a different candidate for president," or "I want one." Just Harris or TBD.
Well, it also doesn't seem like there are any. It seems like, all of these other candidates sort of like realized this is where the critical mass is. I mean, there was, I think it was on Saturday or Friday. There was a piece, I don't know if it was in the Times. I don't know if you remember this one, Emma, but like where someone said, I don't care. Let's just, forget the mini primary. Just go with Kamala because we got to get this done with. And was there a sense? I mean, have you heard anything? It feels like everything was so tight-lipped. I don't think anybody, even in the Harris camp, was aware of anything until Saturday. Saturday morning or Saturday either. That's my sense, anyways. That where Biden stood on this, like, was he? How much? Was he ever entertaining this idea of a mini primary, or was it like, no, I picked her to be VP. I can't, it's a poor reflection on me if I say now that because theoretically she's a heartbeat away from the presidency, right? I mean, if he was already the nominee and he decided I can't do this anymore, wouldn't she have automatically been the nominee? If he had been
she would have been. Well, if he had like died from COVID, frankly, she would have been president. Yeah. So that's the thing. Just people had already gone through the process of imagining what President Kamala Harris would be like to some extent. I know the only thing we know that Biden worried that she was not electable on her own, but not that he said, what's our plan B? He didn't really consider that. It was very important to him that he had won the primary. And as far as I know, and I don't know everything that happened in the room with Biden and his top 4 staffers, but they never said what's a great plan B to save the party. It was more, can I run or do I have to hand it to my vice president?
Okay.
Yeah, and I would also say her approval rating right now is very much tied to the general disapproval of Biden. That's going to be an issue that she does run into, but there's also, because the disapproval of Biden is so tied to his age, him saying I'm stepping aside, and the overwhelming kind of talking point is that this is patriotism. I think it alleviates a lot of that pressure for her. And especially because the Republicans, they're going with that this is just like January 6th. This is Kamala's coup of Biden as he voluntarily steps aside. They've got nothing. They've got nothing. Is my as of right now. They're making fun of her laugh or something like that. They'll find something. I mean, he stuck her with immigration, which felt like
but he didn't. He stuck her with negotiating with Mexico and Guatemala and Nicaragua, and that, I mean, it's not a policy that I like, but it worked out the way they wanted it to. It sure seems.
I noticed today that Ted Cruz said that she was the border czar, and he said that's not my term, that's Joe Biden's term, and it's not Joe Biden's term. It was this. There's this thing in the press that we've done for 15 years where everyone who gets a job we call him a czar. And so she kind of got handed that by.
But he's going back for one. That's a deep cut from the Obama years too. I mean,
yes, where everyone who had a job was a czar. Yeah.
But that was when the Republicans were anti-Russia, and so they were worried about the czars at that time. I mean, it's confusing, but I just want to note, like,
Sure.
I think Emma's got a very good point, which I had really contemplated at all. The love that is now being espoused for Joe Biden in the press. I mean, it almost makes you blush a little bit. Like it's a little bit embarrassing, but they're like, they're talking to him about him now, like, in a way that Democrats rarely talk about their presidents, where they're going to put him on Mount Rushmore. That's got to end up only benefiting. If it does anything, it's only going to benefit Harris at that point, right? I would imagine. Right? I mean, they're talking about him like if Joe Biden put himself in his aspirations in front of, or put the country ahead of him, maybe it starts a different narrative. I don't know. I mean, but it's definitely not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt her. That's for sure.
They're trying to contrast it with Trump, who's clearly me. I think that's an effective contrast again, but you know how I stand, where I stand.
Yeah. I mean, they're both literally the party line around this. And this would have happened a year ago had Biden done this. Is, can you believe the selflessness of doing this, of being able to win the presidency again and passing up for the good of the country? That they will do that. I mean, there's going to be a Joe Biden tribute video at the DNC. There's going to be a Joe Biden Presidential Museum. There always was.
It's not just Democrats who are doing it. It's like it's all the centrist opiners and like the whole body politic it seems like is doing that, but who knows how that impacts people. But all right, let me ask you this. Have you heard anything in terms of Kennedy?
No. So Kennedy spoke yesterday. He was in Massachusetts and gave a press conference, and it was kind of the voices that keep ringing in my head, because I'm old millennial, are the nihilists from The Big Lebowski. It's not fair. Her girlfriend cut off a toe. Like it was that sort of tone where it just was unfair in his view that Democrats, the DNC structured the primary so that it was hard for Biden to lose, where South Carolina was going first. And had they just not messed with the primary, maybe he could have won the primary against Joe Biden, but it's too late for that. And now his line has been, what they're doing is anti-democratic. He compared it, not the press conference, I think, on Fox, to how Russia chooses its leaders. But he's just annoyed that this happened, because a lot of his rationale was that I'm running against two old men, and he was saying for months that Biden it was irresponsible to run him. He's too mentally weak to run for president, and now he's running against somebody who is I mean, I assume he voted for, because he was living in California, and I don't think he was not voting Democratic in 2016. Now he has to argue that, well, this is unfair, and he's somebody who got a little bit screwed by this. I don't know to the extent Cornel West and Jill Stein are, but there was a lot of a vote out there, a lot of votes for just, I don't like the fact that I'm choosing between these two old guys again. And he's the most directly impacted by that. So back when Haley was in the race, Fox News did polling on how voters would go if it was Haley and not Trump versus Biden. And RFK did very well. There were a lot of voters who were MAGA voters who were furious, and they would have voted for Kennedy. The only polling I've seen with Harris in the race and not Biden recently was Atlanta Journal-Constitution, where it's I think a 5-point Trump lead, and Kennedy's just not relevant. So I don't think he's going to be super relevant in this context.
Well, I mean, my sense is that he will bleed a little bit of Democratic support, maybe not a lot, but a little bit, which means that the net that he takes is going to be more from Trump. And it's also hard to disaggregate this from that tape that came out. I'm curious, because this get barely reported, but it was his son that leaked the tape.
Yes.
And
who was angry that Trump didn't pick him for VP. That was what he
said
in the post. Well, he said that Trump had a chance to choose a vice president that would have unified the country, and instead he went with, he said some pro-vaccine insult about J.D. Vance that was actually, I follow this closely and I don't know what he was talking about.
His son did that?
Yeah, Bobby the Third.
I didn't see that.
Deleted right away. Yeah.
Oh, I thought Bobby, because the tweet that I saw from Bobby Jr. was, or the third was, this is a conversation that needs to be made public. I didn't realize the other parts that were going on there. Oh, that's fascinating. So he was mad at Trump.
Yes, he was mad at Trump because, and this is, I think it was Eric Weinstein, one of the Weinstein brothers, the guys who were just on every podcast all the time talking about the establishment. We're like, how come the establishment doesn't want Tulsi Gabbard or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. do this? And Snowden, who I think people have more respect for, said, "Why Kennedy's just sitting right there?" The reason, there's lots of reasons. One reason Democrats don't trust Kennedy and Gabbard because they keep changing their position and saying they work for Trump, and Kennedy did leave open. So he said, if I was the Democrats, I would talk to me. If I was a Democratic elder or statesman, I would talk to me and see if I want to run, but I'm not running right now. And that's just not going to happen because he's much more simpatico with Trump, and he keeps hinting that he'd be willing to join a Trump administration. I was talking yesterday to before, so he gave us, I think it was 5:15 was Kennedy East Coast. And at like 5:03, I was talking to Trump people who were hoping that Kennedy might drop out and endorse Trump because they really think he's in that mindset.
I wonder if he is, to some extent, but
he definitely more than endorsing the Democrats. He said he had a respect for Biden, but he is treating this like cheating, basically. What happened yesterday?
Crazy. All right. What are the talking points that you think, to the extent that the Republicans were like, we've seen, and we'll show a tweet that people are complaining that Harris does not have any kids of her own. She's a stepmom.
Right. She's a spinster.
What other talking points do you think that they're going to do? Like, do they? It seems to me, if I was the Republicans, about 2 months after the debate, at the least, but maybe even 2 months ago, I would have just put it in a shelf. Here's the narrative that we would build on Kamala Harris. What is the narrative going to be?
They have a few. So I was talking to Trump people about their oppo on her, and it's a lot, and it's a combination of she was bad when she was running for president, and she's bad for different reasons as Joe Biden's vice president. So running for president, she was endorsing a bunch of progressive ideas halfway, and luckily I'm diseased. I remember all these fights in 2019. Everyone has forgotten, but Medicare for all. She came out for it, and then she wasn't willing to defend the idea of phasing out private insurance, so she waffled. Abolishing ICE, she had a waffling statement about how we should restructure ICE. Defunding the police, she had a waffling statement there. She did support when the city of LA reduced the police funding budget to increase social spending. And I was living in LA right after that for 2.5 years. That was not very popular. That if you made her own that, it's not very popular. But they're combining that with, and she was the quote unquote border czar, and inflation was her fault. She was there for all the failed Biden things, because we're still not sure how much of angst about Biden is age and how much is anger with him. The reason we're not sure is because 2022 happened, and there's lots of voters who went to the polls and said, I have a negative opinion of Joe Biden. I think he's doing a bad job. The country's in the wrong track. I'm going to go vote for Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer and all the Democrats I can, because I don't like the Republicans. Like that, they're not sure where that delta is. But those are the arguments they're combining. The stranger arguments, I've seen them.
Oh, hold on. I just want to comment on those, because
sure.
Those seem like they're geared to peel off the left in a way that it didn't seem to. I mean, it's not like Biden maybe not have waffled on any of those positions, because he came out on the wrong side of all those when he ran in 2020. So, like, who is that supposed to resonate with? I mean, look, there are plenty of things that I have issue with Kamala Harris about, but I'm going to vote for her over Donald Trump. I mean, speaking as if I was in a swing state in particular, but maybe just in general at this point. But I mean, who is that supposed to resonate with? Because I don't think that's going to work.
I don't know, because it's more of a thinker that you can blame her for everything bad that happened under Biden, and she deserves personal responsibility, none of the good. And the argument by Democrats, of kind of pivoting from what you were asking to what Democrats are saying, is there's just stuff that Biden couldn't talk about for the same reason he had a bad debate. He couldn't really explain as he tried to, yes, the whole world had inflation and we're actually beating it, and interest rates are going to come down, says the Fed. She can explain that. She hasn't been in the position to do it yet. I do hear a lot of optimism because the last 24 days were very tense, and she was on stage in big settings with hundreds of reporters there, like the Essence Fest, and she did not screw up. She delivered the administration's message. It was in a context where most reporters were like, all right, whatever, please get to the part about Biden. But she was just doing normal Democratic messaging for 3 weeks, and that made them pretty happy. But yeah, for Republicans, they are going to run against her the way they're running against Biden, and assuming that because she flipped from some stuff in 2019-20, that you can portray her as a much more left-wing candidate. So yeah, if you don't like Biden, it's going to be even worse under her. She's a California Democrat. She's been waiting behind the scenes to drive us even further to the left. She used pronouns in a meeting once. That one I have seen where
I've seen that where she also said, "I'm wearing a blue suit,"
because she was with blind people.
Because she was with blind people. I mean, she's so woke.
Yeah,
she's like, I mean, like actually, like being conscious of the fact that there are people who have different challenges in the room with her. That is just. But I mean, okay. But here's my thing: it's like those people who are going to respond to that. Like I've seen that already. The people who are going to, and I think Elon Musk was pushing it. I think actually, now that I think about it, I think that's where I saw it. Are they the ones who are like, I was going to vote for Biden, but now that I see that she actually recognizes that some people are blind, I'm not going to? Like,
just fill in the gaps for people that she is a California lefty who, shops at Erewhon and uses pronouns when she's writing memos. That sort of argument is going to be part of it. The cat lady thing that you referred to before, so that came from J.D. Vance in particular. J.D. Vance has been on a riff for years that one problem with the left is that they don't have children, they don't have a stake in the future, and she's a great example because she never had kids. She got married later in life to somebody who had kids already. I've seen other conservatives make that argument. The counterpoint is always George Washington. He didn't have kids, but they're trying to say that she is part of this global agenda to destroy the West. And I'm not like being sarcastic when I say it.
No,
this is one of the ideas is they're trying to mainstream transgenderism and LGBT and alternative lifestyles because they want to destroy Americans and replace them with a third world. That's behind that rhetoric basically. And I don't think that's in coffee shops they're not talking about, but that's the rhetoric. Yeah.
I'm begging them to run on basically the Democrats have a gender bending agenda, run on trans kids again. That worked out so well in 2022. And then also give Kamala Harris an opening to talk about her reproductive health and her choices not to have biological children. Here, this was from this guy who I guess works for the Federalist Society. He's a Project 2025
Article 3
guy.
project.
Yeah.
Will Chamberlain.
Really simple, under-discussed reason why Kamala Harris shouldn't be president. No children. Just, I mean, this is like, it literally is just here you go. Here is how you can talk about abortion in a way that's personal and private to you, and how you can expand it out and make the issue of the election the issue that's personal to Kamala Harris on a silver platter gifted by the Republicans, if they go down that road.
Yeah, I think that is fraught because it's the opposite of the moment in the debate where Biden was talking about healthcare and brought it back to immigration. The opposite of that would be, we're winning this, let me bring this back to abortion rights and women's reproductive health, because she's very comfortable talking about that. And everyone knows somebody who I think everyone knows somebody who got married later in life or didn't have kids or tried to have kids. It didn't happen. You don't usually bring it up. It's kind of a rude thing to talk about. So if that's front of mind, but there's other stuff. There's I saw MAGA guys talking about how what was her love life, like who did she sleep with that helped her career?
That's that Willie Brown thing. They're doing that from the mayor. I mean, see, but this is I'm curious if you've noticed this, because the Willie Brown thing is actually a very much racially coded and also DEI, right? Because their argument is she got to be whatever it was, DA or Attorney General because she slept with Willie Brown. So she's not qualified for anything. And she's not, the reason why she's there is because she's a DEI hire. And I'm curious as to like how much the Republicans are sensitive to the dangers for them in going there and whether they're going to be able to stop like a lot of their, I mean, because the stuff that's going to get clicks and, you know, which represents a huge portion of their messaging machine, it seems to me, from my experience, is going to go there. They're going to try not to for like a half a day, but then they're going to go there because that's where they go.
I don't know if you'd be hearing that from Trump. That's why I cite Vance doing the cat lady thing, because he's done this against her and AOC and a couple other Democrats, Pete Buttigieg, who has adopted children. So that's in the mainstream. It is not beyond Trump's ability to do this stuff. He did it with Nikki Haley at the very end of the South Carolina primary. He didn't go very far, but yeah. You know Trump. He will every couple months some reporter writes, "This is a new Trump," and he's changed his tone, and then he goes on stage and says something that no other candidate would say because it might backfire.
Slept with Willie Brown just to get ahead, but some people are saying that, but I would never say that.
Well, and Brown has been, so he's still alive. He's in, I believe he might be over 90 at this point, and he's been a little bit dismissive of her, except he's called her ruthless. He's a guy that reporters go to get, okay, you knew Harris when she was rising in San Francisco politics. You gave her a sort of job that tided her over before she got elected. And he's not attacked her, but I don't know how many people are going to care about that, because if you go to people's personal lives and who they slept with, Trump is very vulnerable on that. Why give another example to bring that up? Dave? Yeah.
What are you talking about?
They've really, I mean, well, they've got like Men in Black flashed everybody away from the Jean Carroll thing. No one talks about it. So how much do you want to talk about how she came up? And also the argument that she's just incompetent and it was hired for her race. They say that on the record. I got quotes saying that at the RNC. They will say, because it's not entirely wrong. When Biden was choosing his running mate, he said he wanted a woman. The fact that she was a black woman was helpful. Absolutely. She in that job, like if Stephen Miller wanted to sue and say it was affirmative action, like I'm sure some judge at the Fifth Circuit would take it up because he said, yes, I want a woman. I want a woman for this job, not a man. But before that, she had to win a bunch of elections. And what some Democrats see as the tragedy of Harris is that she had a great brand until she started running for president, which was, I'm in San Francisco, so I'm not conservative, but I'm a tough on crime prosecutor. She happened to run in a cycle where that was unpopular, and she ameliorated it a little bit. She went probably too far on supporting cutting police funds, but that's now a popular idea, and they really think, is there some way to reboot the Kamala image where people hear about how, if you're concerned about crazy liberals letting people just commit crime in the streets, that wasn't her. She fixed that. I don't know how that's going to play, because I've heard Republicans, I've not heard anything worry about that. I've heard some of them speculate they might attack her on that basis. The way that, remember, there was a week in 2020 where they were running ads that both said Joe Biden put too many black men in prison and Joe Biden will defund the police. Right. They might try that. It didn't work very well, but they might try that again with her, because that old image is pretty good. Whatever you thought, I mean, I'm not trying to be glib. If you're marching in 2020 and you resent that she called herself a top cop, that didn't get any better over the years. But for the swing voter who needs to be convinced, or told, frankly, that the Biden administration spent a bunch more money on community policing, which they all want to talk about. I was talking to the mayor of Milwaukee at the convention as Democrat. He's like, yes, we really want to talk about how we have more police funding because of Joe Biden. It'd be great. She can do that. It just, how does she reintroduce herself? That is being done right now. It's not entirely up to her. It's what does she say that gets quoted? Which conservative talking points pierce the veil and get covered?
What are you hearing about vice president? Like, I mean, there seems to be, I don't know, 8 names out there. But do you have a sense of before we get into the names, do you have a sense of the profile that people want? Like, now I know if she picks Andy Bashir or Roy Cooper, people are going to say DEI. You're just going for a white guy from,
that is the flip. I'm laughing. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm laughing because it's the exact opposite of 2020. I think, and this was when Hillary was choosing her running mate.
And I'm sure that will follow them for the rest of their careers, that they were considered because they were a white guy, from like from a southern or a swing state. I'm sure that will haunt them for the rest of their careers. Yeah,
I don't think people will care that much. What Democrats get. No, I on that. I know. I'm taking it too literally, but what's going to happen with their running mate? People will be introduced to this running mate, and they'll be the most obscure vice presidential candidate in a long time, especially compared to Vance, who was famous, was a celebrity before he got into politics. His book has sold at least 1.6 million copies, Netflix movie, etc. She's not going to have a running mate who's in a Netflix movie, so it'll be, who is this other person that's on the ticket? And it will probably be one of these. So I've heard the same. Everyone's heard the same things. It's kind of a loop now. Roy Cooper in North Carolina, Andy Bashir in Kentucky, Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania are the top choices. There are some Democrats pushing Mark Kelly in Arizona. And both Kelly and Shapiro, you can tell a story because Shapiro is the governor of Pennsylvania. You can talk about the shooting. Kelly's wife survived. Gabby Gibbs survived a shooting. Is still with us, even though people reported her dead. It's like a miraculous story. So all four of these people, it's not like when Obama was thinking of taking Evan Bayh out of the Senate and giving Republicans the Senate seat. All of them would be replaced by Democrats. The only complications would be there'd be a special Senate election in 2026 in Arizona instead of 2028 because it's every 2 years if the term's not over. And in North Carolina, when Roy Cooper's out of the state, the governor is going to be Mark Robinson, the Republican candidate for governor. I've heard some Democrats who like that because they want more attention on Mark Robinson because they think anyone who sees him is going to be offended by him. And for funny enough, in Kentucky, it's Bashir who has the least to lose because he is the governor of a supermajority Republican legislature. He has a lieutenant governor who's a Democrat, should take over. Not a big deal, frankly, in Kentucky. For Shapiro, it's that Republicans run the state Senate. There are new maps. They still control the state Senate. And if he was chosen, then there'd be an election. So we don't know who'd be in the state Senate in Pennsylvania next year. But theoretically, it's before the lieutenant governor, it's the Republican state Senate president who'd be lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania. I bring this up to be comprehensive. None of this is like a deal breaker for any Democrat. They're all in a good position. Again, it's not like 2016 when they really had pretty thin choices of who to pick, and Kane rose to the top in part because there was a Democratic governor of Virginia and he could replace him. Like they have a much broader field now. People who they're very confident can go on TV, be introduced, be pretty popular pretty fast.
Just for Mark Kelly, he's one of the only Democrats in the Senate who hasn't endorsed the PRO Act, and I know she's personal friends with Kelly, but that seems to be the least intuitive for me. If they want to shore up labor support, I feel like she's going to go all in on youth or future focused politics and go with Bashir, who's young and charismatic and can talk to JD Vance, being from the same area.
Yeah, she's the same age, I think, almost exactly as Kelly, and that's fixable. So again, I mentioned Tim Kaine, everyone's most memorable running mate. But when he was chosen, he kind of had to walk back some of his abortion stances, which he'd held his whole life. And I imagine that would happen with Kelly because I was checking with labor last night, and every labor, I've not found a labor union yet that endorsed Biden but won't endorse Harris. But why risk it? That's the only. I'm glad you brought up that ideological contrast. It's kind of the only one because everyone else is in the mix. There, because Whitmer has taken herself out. Doesn't mean she won't get it, but she's not in the mix right now. She has a trifecta. She's passed a lot of stuff. The other people in this mix have not operated in a trifecta. They've been Democratic governors of states where Republicans run a lot of stuff, and they've done this. Always happens because swing voters like it when things don't really happen. They're all pretty popular, and not all of them have just worked with Republicans and gotten a few big deals. Roy Cooper got Medicaid expansion, which he's very comfortable talking about. Shapiro and Bashir have had to fight with a legislature that overrides them. And Bashir, I think, twice on abortion and trans issues. Just they keep overriding his veto. In Shapiro, they won't pass the bill he wants in the house after it gets in the House. So they haven't really had big ideological tests. The other exception I'd add is that Shapiro is Jewish and very pro-Israel, very critical of Gaza protests when they were happening at the University of Pennsylvania, which I imagine Democrats don't want to talk about forever. But that's the only static I've seen from these people with her.
How much? I imagine there's a couple of competing sort of ideas in terms of what qualifies for a vice presidential pick. I'm talking not so much in terms of in terms of profile, right? Like, the argument for Kelly and for Shapiro is if you can get a point or two from their respective states where they're both popular, then, those are two states that are going to be pretty important to the nominee. I guess you get a better sense of that. Like, it suggests to me that there, if that's a consideration, which I would imagine it has to be at least one consideration, they're not going to make this pick for a couple of weeks until they see what the polling shows where Harris is at.
Yeah.
What about a guy and Pritzker would not, Illinois, I think they're feeling pretty comfortable. But what about a Pritzker or even a Murphy in Connecticut, where Pritzker might be able to bring, I don't know what unique from those other guys, but Murphy, if there's some question about trying to find a Joe Biden figure insofar as you're talking about foreign policy, that may be it. I don't know. Have you heard any of those other names? Have you heard any other names outside of governors? I'm just curious as to whether there's a notion of someone coming in and being I'm foreign policy type of. I assume it's not going to be Menendez.
No, I haven't heard him. No, I literally haven't heard anyone from the Senate. Except for Kelly, and I don't know why exactly, but they are trying to build a story here, and it's the vice president who's ready for the job with somebody who's governed outside DC and has a big family and a good story. I keep saying the word story, but that's part of this. I've heard more about this set of governors and Kelly than I have, and I've not heard anything about the other guys. But you're right; they're not. So the hurry that they're in is the DNC's virtual nomination process, which they have kind of put on ice, and they're going to revisit later. They wanted to do this in early August before the convention. They now are probably going to wait for the convention because there's not really a problem doing that. So
Wait
they have until.
I thought that was not true. That is not what Jamie.
Oh, it's so stupid.
Oh, come on!
It's so dumb.
Dave, you're not telling me this was all a ruse.
It mostly was. So, this is very wheezy, but you guys have already talked about it. But yeah, they wanted, because Ohio originally had a early deadline. They said, okay, well, to make sure Ohio can't screw us over, we're going to have a virtual vote. And then Ohio changed the deadline, and their position was, we're still going to have a virtual vote because who knows? Ohio could double cross us and change it back to the early deadline, and then the Biden's not in the ballot. Not really an issue right now. The only people I've seen talking about suing are Republican, not candidates, but conservative lawyers who are going to find some way to maybe sue and say, oh, she can't use all the campaign's funds, which won't go anywhere because the FEC never does anything. Right. I've not heard that seriously. It was very self-serving stuff by Democrats who just wanted this over with and didn't think that Biden would drop out.
Matt, who are those two guys? Who are those two guys? Jacob Wall.
Jacob Wall and Jack Berkman.
Oh yeah, Berkman. Are those guys going to sue? Are they in jail?
I think they might be out of jail, but I'm not sure if they're in a good position to sue.
Yeah, that's probably not.
Yeah,
that would be my guess. All right. Well, interesting. Is there anything else you think that we've left on the table here?
No, so much is not figured out yet. Because even the Harris messaging, the anti-Harris messaging is all over the place, and there's not one theme yet. There's not one video meme yet. I did during the convention. I mean, Charlie Kirk was actually the person I talked to who was most worried about this. That good convention in his view, but they were not doing enough to use their free national media to attack Harris. It was just videos of.
You need to save that time to praise Trump. He's Messiah plus. I mean, that takes a lot of time.
Well, I was Kevin. Even if you were in the room, or if you're watching C-SPAN and saw their videos, they had these videos of Biden falling down. They had a whole presentation about how he wasn't serious enough with the Afghan family. Families of people of servicemen members killed in Afghanistan. They had very Biden-specific stuff, and I was waiting. Maybe there'd be some sort of meme. Harris video they cycle in. It didn't really happen. They just kind of ignored her, and they said we'll deal with her if we have to. But I honestly, again, apart from Trump's speech, which rambled, and I saw members of I saw like Byron Donalds walking out halfway through. But apart from that speech being kind of a dud, it just they didn't really get. They had a good convention. They had everyone on message. They were unified. Everyone agreed that Trump was amazing, and then this happened. So they were sort of in denial that they'd have to do it.
That's awesome. I love that. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.